there's a lot of propaganda going around, especially by Hamas sympathizers, those that support the Hamas Palestinian terrorist regime out of Gaza, are spreading throughout social media this meme that Jesus was a Palestinian, and they're trying to guilt and shame Christians into supporting the Palestinian cause, the Hamas terrorist genocidal regime, and their ideology by guilting and shaming Christians into believing that Jesus was a Palestinian, and therefore, since he was a Palestinian and was quote unquote born in Palestine, therefore Christians should support Palestinians and and the dreams and the aspirations of the quote unquote Palestinian people. But is this the case? Is this really true? Is this what Jesus himself believed? Is this what the Gospels teach? Is this what the New Testament actually teaches? So let's go ahead and take a look at some sources from the Gospels themselves, from the Christian New Testament, and see what the belief of Jesus, his family members, his the people that lived in his time, and then the disciples after him, decades and generations after him, what they thought uh, about Jesus, his birth, the land that he lived in, and the land that they lived in, that they shared. What were their names? What did they identify as? So let's take a look at some of these verses. Part one will be discussing, his ethnic and religious identity. Jesus, what was his ethnic and religious identity according to the Gospels? Look at Luke 1:5. In the time of Herod, king of Judea. So in the time, this is close to the time where Jesus was born, roughly 2,000 years ago. Where did this take place? This took place in the region of Judea, the land of Judea, not Palestine. Herod, king of Judea. Okay, look at that historic name and that reference. You could actually look it up. Who was this King Herod? This person did actually exist, and he did rule over an area, a region, a city, a town, an area, a region called Judea. Again, Judea, this is where the Jewish name comes from. This is the land of the Jews. Okay, land of the Jews. Judah, which was one of the tribes of Israel, and actually a region, the southern parts of Israel, where there was the Jewish monarchy, the kingdom, established by King David, King Solomon, and his progeny after him. So let's go to Luke 2:1-4. So Joseph, the father of Jesus, okay, this is Joseph, the father of Jesus, also went up to the town of Nazareth in Galilee, from the town of Nazareth in the Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. They were going to take a census according to the New Testament. The gospel account here in Luke tells us that the Roman occupiers, the Roman colonial powers who had colonized the Jewish homeland, right? They were the ruling empire of the time. They were colonizing and occupying everybody's lands at the time that they could get a hold of. The Jewish homeland was no exception, and they had ordered census to take place. People had to register to at the towns and their place of their birth, where the area of their birth, where their parents and genealogy basically came from. And we see here that they identified as being from the town of Judea, or the area, the region of Judea, okay, the southern kingdom of Judah, the Jewish homeland, the Jewish Holy Land, okay, the town of Bethlehem, the town of David, King David, of course, all right, the king that established the Jewish monarchy, um, and his son Solomon after him, that they they built the holy Jewish temple, etc. We know this from the New Testament here as well, that they concur with this belief. It's nothing to do with any Palestinian state, with any Islamic state, with anything to do. Nothing here says and there's no suggestion whatsoever in any way, shape, or form of anything Palestinian, anything from the Quran, anything from Islam in any way, shape, or form. It's all Jewish. It's all part of the Jewish tradition and the Jewish history, and using Jewish terminology, as Jews have always claimed. So here we go in Matthew 2:21, for example, when Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod. Again, we see another historical figure, uh, Herod, and being described as ruling over, presiding over Judea. Okay, his son Archelaus, etc. We see once again that these are references to Judea. Okay, the Jewish homeland. Okay, the Jewish people's ancient homeland has nothing to do with Palestinians. There's no reference here to any Palestinian area. Herod wasn't ruling over a Palestinian town or Palestinian people. None of that sort is being referenced here. Luke 2:21 through and 22, we see once again Jesus being circumcised according to the Jewish tradition, not the Islamic tradition, not the or any other tradition. It's the eighth day. This is when baby boys, according to the Torah, according to the law of Moses, according to the Jewish commandments and traditions, this is done on the eighth day after the child is born, and he is circumcised on this day. And there's additional things, additional requirements that are, because the child is a firstborn, and we see here that the parents fulfill these Jewish obligations, these Jewish traditions and religious obligations, following the law of Moses, and going to Jerusalem to the Holy Temple to present the child and dedicate the child to the Lord, as the New Testament here says. Again, following Jewish customs and traditions. Again, nothing to do with any Palestinian, Islamic, Quranic verses or Quranic traditions in any way, shape, or form. No Palestinian identity. Again, Muslims is Islamic. You know, tradition and teaching says that circumcision for Muslims is when the child turns 13 years old. Totally different from the Jewish commandments, according to the law of Moses, according to what God had revealed to the Jewish people, which is on the eighth day for the children of Israel. Has nothing to do with the 13th birthday, 13th year after a child is born, like Islam later changed and made up according to what they believed that they received from the founder of their religion. So again, this is strictly Jewish traditions, customs, religious identification. Nothing to do here with anything Palestinian, Arab, Islamic in any way, shape, or form. We see the Jewish temple, we see Jerusalem, we see the Judea, we see Jewish rites, traditions, and customs being practiced here. Everything according to uh, you know Jewish belief, teachings, and history here. Same thing with Luke 2:41 to 42. We see here that every year his parents went to Jerusalem. Again, Jerusalem, not Al-Quds, not any other Islamic name or Palestinian name. This is Jerusalem, the Jewish name for the capital of Israel, the eternal capital of Israel and the Jewish people, for the feast of the Passover. Again, keeping Passover, the holy Passover feast, one of the biggest Jewish feasts and celebrations, which was traditionally kept in Jerusalem with all the families. Everybody would gather in Jerusalem from all over the Jewish homeland. Everybody would travel, make the pilgrimage feast, to travel and celebrate together in Jerusalem and worship the God of Israel together in Jerusalem in the Holy Temple. Again, nothing to do with Palestine, Palestinians, anything with Islam or the Quran. No such thing at all. Luke 4:16, we see that his tradition was to celebrate what? To worship how? As Jews, going to the synagogue on the Sabbath day. We see here that Jesus, as was his custom, went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day. So he kept the Sabbath, worshiped with his fellow Jews on the Sabbath. On the seventh day, he rested on the seventh day, went to worship as a Jew on the seventh day. This was his custom. This is how he was raised. Again, no Palestinian. There is no Palestinian reference here. The Palestinians, Arab or Islamic culture teaches totally different day as their holy day. Again, no reference at all to any Muslim or Palestinian or identity in any way, shape, or form here. John 7:2 to 3, Jesus' own brothers talk, discussing that the Feast of Tabernacles is approaching. The Jewish Feast of Tabernacles is coming near. Therefore, they should go to Judea, okay, Judea, not any other place, not Palestine. Again, they are referring and constantly using Jewish terms, Jewish terminology, Hebrew terms, Hebrew terminology, nothing at all of any kind of Palestinian reference or identity of any way, shape, or form. We see Matthew 26, 17 to 9 to 19 that Jesus had, according to the Gospel of Matthew, with his disciples and friends. He had the Passover feast, the Passover meal that they shared together in Jerusalem. According to Matthew 26, 17 to 19, I will keep the Passover with my disciples at your house. So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them and prepared the Passover. Again, this is something that the Jewish people do. This is the core of Jewish belief, keeping the Passover feast along with the Sabbath, worshiping in the Holy Temple. And again, thoroughly through and through, Jewish themes, Jewish terminology, nothing to do with anything Palestinian, nothing to do with anything from Qatar, from Saudi Arabia, or from Jordan, or for any other country, any other identity. No Egyptian religion here, no religion from Turkey or any other country or any other religion. Sorry, folks, it's just not there. This is all, Jesus is being identified, and we are being told over and over again that he is a Jew. He lived as a Jew. His parents were Jewish. They lived in the Jewish homeland along with their fellow Jews, and we see that they were under Roman colonial occupation. Okay, European colonial occupation of the Romans was raging at the time. And even so, we see that the people that the Romans were trying to colonize and occupy were the Jewish people. Okay, and the Jewish people were clearly in the land of their forefathers, their ancestors there, which was known as Judea, Samaria, etc., as we will see in the next set of verses. Let's go to part two. What cities and towns and regions did Jesus teach according to the gospel? So, what areas did Jesus, after growing up and teaching and spreading his message and becoming very famous throughout in his career, what were these cities that and towns that he taught in? So, we see for Matthew 4:25, Mark 3:7 and 8, Mark 10 and 1, Luke 6:17, John 3:22 and forward. Look at all these sources, folks. Everything here has to do with, again, the Galilee, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan. Look at all these Jewish names. Again, this is the area that Jesus himself identified as being the Judean countryside. John 3:22. This is what he referred to as the regions, the land that he was in, the Judean countryside. Nothing has to do with Palestine. No Palestinian land. Luke 6, when the large crowds were following him, along with his disciples, they came from all over Judea, Jerusalem, etc. Nothing to do with any Palestinians here. There were no Palestinians coming over. His followers were not Palestinians. There was no Quran, nothing Islamic, no mosques, nothing of the sort, folks. Everything was Jewish. These were the Jews living there, and it is clearly, you know, the context, the historical context and reality of where Jesus and his disciples and his fellow Jews at the time were raised. This is where they lived in, and it was clearly all Jewish terminology, all Jewish phraseology. Um, so nothing again that has to do with remotely with anything Palestinian. We see, for example, even at the end, when Jesus was crucified by the Romans, when the Romans tried to put Jesus to death, what was that they used to legally get him killed and eventually crucify him? The charge that they used was that he was claiming to be the king of the Jews, and hence they made sure to make it known in public, to mock the Jews and to mock Jesus, the Jews, etc., destroy their morale by putting a sign. And we see, for example, in John 19:19, that Pilate also had a notice posted on the cross. So Pilate also had a notice posted on the cross, and it read, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And we find this in several other places, such as Mark 15:26, Luke 23:38. Again, King of the Jews, King of the Jews, not Palestinians, not Muslims, not any other ethno-religious identity, only that of the Jews. And we see in the last part 3, where we see that the disciples after Jesus, okay, the generations after Jesus, they all refer to these areas, these regions, these lands as clearly Jewish lands, the Jewish homeland, using again Jewish terminology, Jewish references, and the Jewish names to describe these areas, to clearly point to this very fact that again the Jewish people lived in their ancestral homeland at the time of Jesus, and following the time of Jesus, for the next few generations afterwards. And we see that again, it was all Jewish terminology and references, no mention at all of any kind of Palestinian identity, Palestinian culture, Palestinian beliefs or religion, mythology, nothing of the sort. It was all the Jewish traditions, the Jewish customs, the Jewish holidays, the Jewish feasts, the Jewish religion. These are all the references in the context over here, according to Jesus, according to the Gospels, according to how he was born, where he was born, the reference, the place, what he taught, what he believed, what he actually practiced, who were the audiences that he attracted and message, and then eventually the disciples that carried on his message after him. These were all Jews who followed and believed in the Jewish identity. They identified as Jews and they followed the Jewish customs and traditions. And they referred to the places, to these areas, geographical areas mentioned here, ancient land of the Jews, the land of Judea and Samaria, the heartland of Israel. Samaria was known as the heartland, the Jewish homeland, the central part of Israel, was commonly known as Samaria. That's the historical name. Anybody can look that up once again, and we see that all over the Gospels and the New Testament. Judea, Samaria, Jerusalem, etc. Nothing to do with any Arabic, nothing to do with anything Arabic, with anything from the Quran, anything Islamic at all. Actually, just the opposite, in total opposition to and stark contrast to the Islamic religion, which came much later, hundreds and hundreds of years later. So don't let anybody fool you. Let's stop this nonsense of people claiming that Jesus was a Palestinian or identified as some kind of Palestinian. That's not the case, nothing further from the truth. Anybody that claims such is simply lying